You're listening to Heritage Radio Network. HRN is food radio supported by you. Learn more at heritageradionetwork.org.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Well, welcome to Pizza Quest. I'm Peter Reinhardt, and we have a very special episode today because I'm here with, well, what can I say? Noted author, TV personality, the king of barbecue and grilling, Steven Raichlen. Thank you so much for being here, Steven, and welcome to Pizza Quest.
Well, Peter, thank you. I, of course, am a great fan of your work, so it's nice to be on this Zoom together.
Well, we've our paths have crossed periodically over the years, sometimes just inadvertently. But one thing I mentioned in an email to you is that I was present way back. I think it was one of your earliest books. I think it was Miami Spice. You won an IACP award. And that was the first time that you came on my radar. And I was kind of new to the whole culinary scene. We're talking about 1993, I'm thinking, or 1994.
94. Yeah, the book came out in 93.
And that was before the Barbecue Bible, which is why we're gathered today, because we're going to celebrate with you today the 25th anniversary of probably your most well-known book, the Barbecue Bible, which has sold millions of copies and established you as the go-to person on all things grilling, barbecue, and has led to a whole lot of other stuff. But so back then, 93-ish, 94, we were all just kind of getting started and getting on the general culinary radar. But that wasn't the beginning of your story and your journey. And I was kind of hoping you could give us a little backstory. How did you end up getting into barbecue and grilling as sort of your thing, and all the other books that you've written in between? Did you start out as a writer? Were you a chef? I know you had some culinary training in France, but how did it all begin for you?
Well, it all began at Reed College in Portland, Oregon, where I got a degree in French literature. And I took a wrong turn and sort of wound up in barbecue. No, but at Reed, I majored in French literature. I wrote my thesis on a medieval poet named Christine de Pizan, who turned out to be Europe's first feminist. Although being a clueless 20-year-old, that message mostly went over my head. But while I was doing my research, I came across a medieval cookbook. It was called The Form of Curry, written in the 1370s.
Wow.
And I was so intrigued by the idea that people were writing cookbooks, 700 years ago. So I applied for a Watson Foundation fellowship. Now, Thomas Watson founded IBM. These fellowships were created in his honor. And I proposed to study medieval cooking in Europe, and there may have been a few bottles of Retsina that helped me write the proposal. But at any rate, quite astonishingly, I received a grant from the Watson Foundation to study medieval cooking in Europe. That got me to France. It got me to kind of studying the history of food and the intersection of food and history and culture, which is really what's driven my career for the last 40 years. A typical medieval recipe ran something like take this, that, and the other combined in the customary fashion. Well, I didn't know what the customary fashion was, so I figured I'd better go to cooking school and, at least kind of get an understanding of the process of cooking, which is what led me to La Varenne, the École de Cuisine La Varenne and Cordon Bleu.
With Anne Willen?
Yeah, with Anne Willen, absolutely.
Yeah. One of the great cooking teachers in our era.
Absolutely. And, that really kind of launched things. I decided I wanted to be a food writer. So I came back to the U.S. I wrote one story for the Washington Post where I had a connection. That was accepted. I wrote one story for the Oregonian, my kind of newspaper, Portland, Oregon. That was accepted. And I wrote a story for our local hippie our local hippie underground weekly, and that led to a column in the weekly, and then I was a food writer.
Well, it's funny how so many people found their way into food through, unexpected avenues. I mean, if as I was reading your bio, you weren't even born in the United States, or you were born in Japan. Is that correct?
Yeah, in Nagoya, Japan. My father was in the service, and my mom came over to visit, and I came 9 months later. Fortunately, I did not spend a lot of time in Japan on that particular trip, but I guess subconsciously or subliminally, it gave me a taste for travel, and I've, of course, have been back to Japan many times, including a battle with the Iron Chef.
Oh yeah, right. You beat an Iron Chef, didn't you?
I beat not only an Iron Chef, I beat the meanest, fiercest, most scary Iron Chef around,
Oh my God.
Chiba. Yeah, that was pretty amazing.
Well, we gotta find out, what did you beat him? How did you beat him? What was the secret ingredient, and what did you do that kind of won the judges over for you?
Well, I did, he did this very elaborate thing. It was like a kind of created a mini volcano, and he had $100 a piece exotic mushrooms and abalone and lobster, and I did barbecued baby back ribs and chicken. And I actually got the Japanese judges to eat with their fingers, which in Japan is completely unheard of. And my assistant was my stepson, Jake, who's 6 foot tall and drop dead gorgeous. And I think that he helped sway the judges as much as anything I did. But
many factors in play there. So, but was the theme that you had to do everything over like open fire cooking?
Yeah, everything over live fire. That's right. Everything over live fire.
I got to get that episode now. I didn't even realize so that was on the original Japanese version of Iron Chef, not the American version.
Right. Well, actually, it was on a show called Barry World Views, and it was they styled it as a competition of the barbecue gods. I guess the Japanese are given to hyperbole, and it was the judges were primarily teenage girls, believe it or not. And what they had done is they had rigged up these lucite tubes and given everybody either pink or blue ping pong balls. And the audience kind of voted with the ping pong balls, and my ping pong balls were in a higher column than Michiba's was. So I promptly decided to retire from competition, Iron Chef competitions. And Michiba, right? Michiba knew only one word, and that word was rematch. So, anyhow.
Well, but you never had a rematch with him, right?
Never had a rematch. No.
You got to leave him wanting that now. So, was he after the show was over? Did he soften up a little bit? Was he still a mean guy?
Nah, he was a pussycat. He was very, very friendly, and he invited us into the restaurant and served us a spectacular. Look, I'm not a chef. I'm a writer. It's what's on my passport. It's kind of how I define my being in the world. And in fact, if a day goes by and I haven't written something, I don't feel like I've earned an honest day's work, even though I might have made a TV show or, taught a class. But, the fact that I won this thing, honestly, was a complete fluke, and I'm happy to have the victory, but, be under no illusion. I could no more get into a busy restaurant on a Saturday night and come out alive than, I could scale Mount Everest.
Yeah, but those are the kind of, moments, but peak moments when you can say, you went on, not only got to beat an Iron Chef, you actually went on the Iron Chef show in Japan, which has got to be intimidating.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who would probably melt just under the pressure of being there. So that must have been intense and fun.
It was intense and fun. It was pretty intimidating. Yeah, they had a little American flag up on my station, and that it was stuck up with with bad Scotch tape or something. It kept falling down, and I thought, gee, I hope this is not an omen. Anyway,
right. That was them trying to get into your head,
into my head. It was great, and but my beat really, Peter, over the last 20 years, and, barbecue was certainly not what I started writing about. I was a restaurant critic for Boston Magazine. I was a wine and spirits columnist for GQ magazine. But once I got into barbecue, the niche I really carved out is, I guess, what I call now planet barbecue. And it's really this idea of global grilling. I have circumnavigated the globe probably 7 or 8 times in the process of researching various books and And that's really what fascinates me is, because grilling, it's universal. Almost every culture does it, but almost every culture does it differently. And
Yeah.
what fascinated me is to watch those differences.
Well, that's I think what's wonderful and unique about your book too is that I think of you as sort of a barbecue omnivore. If you live in North Carolina where I am right now, it's hard to have an objective conversation about barbecue with somebody because they have a very specific, narrow idea of barbecue being a particular kind of pulled pork style. And when you try to open, for instance, a couple nearby, there's a place that's open doing all the different styles, and a lot of people have a hard time supporting that because it violates their ethic, which is barbecue is the way we know it here in North Carolina. But what you brought, I think, to the front for everybody was the realization that barbecue as a concept is universal and it manifests in many different ways. And then your book celebrates that.
Absolutely. And it really is a universal language. And, in an age when there's a Starbucks on every third street corner, not only in North America, but, in Korea and South Africa and France, it's really some of the truly last regional food around. And that has really sustained my interest and passion for a lifetime.
Well, you mentioned that you were writing in Boston, so you somehow you ended up going to college in Portland at Reed, but then flipped over to the East Coast. So how did you? What was the journey that got you to Boston? Because that's where I went to college, and I kind of found myself learning how to cook in a kitchen at a vegetarian restaurant in Boston back.
Which one?
It was called Route One Cafe, ROT, Route One Cafe. It was gone by 1974, but sure. During those 3 years, that's where I basically learned how to use a wok, and we were doing all sorts of cool, organic. We were the early organic guys, but Boston was where I kind of started out myself. So, and when you said underground paper, I immediately thought of like Boston Underground. There was Boston After Dark, and there was the Boston Phoenix, which were two weekly underground magazines. I don't know if you were writing for them at all, but
I did write for the Phoenix. But let's really play the history here. It was the Real Paper, if you remember the Real Paper.
The Real Paper, yeah, right. That came, and of course I was gone from Boston from about, I think, around 1974. I started my more, my journey, my quest for the meaning of life, and but it all kicked off there in Boston. But I supported myself during those poverty days by selling for 25 cents a copies of the Phoenix and Boston After Dark, and later the Real Paper, just on the street corners. And that's how a lot of people survived, was selling these weekly papers.
And I don't know if you had this experience. My first 2 years as a freelance writer, I think I made $4,000 a year. And it's the only 2 years of my whole life where I felt like I had everything I wanted.
Oh, wow. Well, so what brought you to Boston, though?
Well, so after Reed, I won this Watson Foundation Fellowship. I spent 2 years in Europe, primarily in France. And then I moved back to Boston, actually, with a girlfriend who went to Harvard Law School. And that's where I began my freelance writing career. The relationship didn't last, but, Boston was a great place to be in the 1970s and 80s. The first flowering of regional New England cuisine, some of the legends of legendary chefs, Lydia Shire, Jasper White. Also, Jean-Georges von Gerichten. I think I was the first critic to ever write him up. He was the chef of the Swiss Hotel. And
I didn't realize that he got
Crossing.
Did the Boston thing, before he became the Mr. Everywhere chef.
Really?
So that was a good time to be in Boston, and in a lot of cities. That was sort of the early stages of the culinary awakening in America. And had you already studied at La Varenne, or did that come later?
No, I did my year at La Varenne and Cordon Bleu. That was right after college. That was during my Watson year.
So you already had the language and the frame of reference for what was going on in the culinary scene. So you could not only write about it, but really, understand it from the inside out.
I did. And, it would, sort of one of the great debates is, does a critic need to know how to cook to be a good critic? Uh-huh. And I believe that, knowledge is a good thing, and you really do need to, if you know, the more you know about the process, the better a critic you are. And, there are other schools of thought that say, well, the average diner is not necessarily schooled in food, although I think that's very different now. I think the knowledge about food on the American public today is huge. The ingredients we know about, the process, how much people cook at home. But that was not the case when I was reviewing restaurants in the 70s.
Well, reviewing restaurants is a great way to expand, I think, anyone's culinary palette, and coming up with the right words and the way to frame the conversation is an art form in itself. But for me, I got to do, when I was just starting out, not knowing that I was not culinary school trained or anything. I was learned by just doing. But one of the ways that I grew my vocabulary and my palate was to go and do local restaurant reviews by then I was living in California, and there was not an underground paper, but a weekly paper. And they needed a writer to do restaurants, and I couldn't afford to eat at restaurants, but they covered that, so I got to go to restaurants and see what was going on. And suddenly I was developing a whole new vocabulary, which helped me to appreciate other people's writings when I would read the reviews in, whether it was Gourmet Magazine or Bon Appetit or, anywhere, that it was a whole world opening up through the language of food. And I think that's what you kind of also did. But so you started out with that, and you kind of were paying your dues, but then somehow you ended up going from Boston down to Miami. What pulled you to Miami?
Again, it was another woman.
It all starts with that.
Right. I'll be behind every man, great man, right? My current wife, actually, and we had a long distance relationship for 10 years. And then finally, I proposed on bended knee, I might add. And you would appreciate this, being in the bread and baking field. So she had always said she wanted a 2-carat ring with step-down baguettes. So when I proposed, I had a French baguette brought to the table with 2 carrots standing upright in it.
Oh, wow.
Yes, what a romantic.
Very nice. Very.
Anyway, but Miami was great getting down here. I was here at the right time, right place. The whole new Floridian cuisine thing with Mark Botello and Norman.
You were there like when Boston was having its flowering, but South Florida was really a happening place then in the culinary world.
Absolutely exploded. So I proposed a book called Miami Spice to Workman Publishing. Actually, at the time, I called it Hot Food ! Which, looking back on it, was about possibly the worst title. Actually, the second worst title. The worst title was my original working title for the Barbecue Bible. But Workman, they finally they bought the book. They changed it to Miami Spice.
Yeah.
It was my first, big, well-selling cookbook with a book tour, and it introduced me to Peter Workman and a relationship with a publishing house that is still going strong 25 years later.
Yeah, they were very important publishers for the culinary world, and came out with what I viewed as sort of heavy recipe-driven books. I mean, your books were not just like 120 pages of this. It was loaded, like hundreds of pages of recipes, 500 recipes or something like that. And certainly in some of them, the Barbecue Bible has at least 500 recipes, right?
It does. Yeah. Peter Workman, back at the time, he used to love what he called category killers. And a category killer was the ultimate definitive word on the subject, a book so big that you could, if you were short, you could sit on it to put children on it to sit upright at the table. And Barbecue Bible was, and when I started Barbecue Bible, I thought it was going to be, okay, it'll be 100 recipes, I'll visit 10 countries, I'll kind of knock it out in a year. Took 4 years to write, grew to 500 plus recipes. I actually wrote 4 books in the interim to pay for the research for Barbecue Bible. But wow. It came out, it was the right book, the right time, and it exploded. And it's the fact that it's still in print is I am awestruck and humbled.
Well, we're coming up to a break, and I want to spend our second segment with you focusing more on the Barbecue Bible. But you did say that in addition to your early PBS shows or with public television programs, you've got a new series now. Is this like your fifth iteration of a cooking series for PBS?
It is. It's called Planet BBQ.
Planet BBQ. Yeah, that's what we want people to.
It's actually, the full name is Steven Reichlen's Planet BBQ, but it launches on May 27th. It's a how-to barbecue show, but it's much more internationally focused. We have episodes on Argentina, on Brazil, the Caribbean. We have several shows on kind of cross-cultural and transatlantic barbecue. Lots of guests, lots of field trips, but also plenty of segments where I'm sort of demonstrating my way of doing barbecuing and grilling. And we taped in San Antonio. It was really fun shoot. So I hope some of that fun comes through on in the shows.
Well, I'm sure it will, because you've had a lot of experience now creating these shows, and they've all been very popular and educational. I mean, when I watch your shows, I always leave every episode with a new trick or technique, or just get fired up about a particular flavor, profile that you've exposed. So let's talk about that, because I'm sure that the Barbecue Bible, which also is this, in a sense, the prelude to Planet BBQ. You could all. The Barbecue Bible could have just as easily been called Planet BBQ, because that seems to be what the theme of the book is. So let's explore what that is, and maybe pick your brain a little bit for some of your most frequently asked questions and the things that that get you excited and still are keeping you excited as you continue to explore this. I guess you could say this vein of that opened up when you discovered barbecue and grilling as a subject matter that is the gift that keeps on giving, because you just never run out of ideas and books to write about. So I want to find out all about that when we come back in part two. You're with us today, everybody, on Pizza Quest with Steven Raichlen. So today we're really on Barbecue Quest. We're on the quest for the planetary what's the word, the secret sauce of what makes barbecue the most global, universal of all foods. We'll be back in just a moment.
This episode is brought to you by Roberta's, home of Heritage Radio Network for 10 years. Roberta's was founded in Bushwick in 2008 and has become one of the most iconic restaurants in the country. HRN made its home inside of Roberta's in 2009, and together they have become part of the DIY fabric of the neighborhood. Roberta's, the pizza restaurant, is open for lunch and dinner 7 days a week and serves much more than just the famous wood-fired pizzas. Their team dreams up new salads, pastas, and sandwiches on the regular. Roberta's Tiki Bar is alive and well in the back garden, serving up frozen drinks in the summer and hot toddies in the winter. Stop by the bakery and takeout spot next door for fresh breads, sticky buns, and pizzas to go. And of course, there's the 2 Michelin-starred Blanca tucked away in the garden for truly daring diners. But Roberta's also extends beyond Bushwick, with multiple locations in New York City and now in Los Angeles. You can also find their frozen pies in grocery stores around the country. The spirit of Roberta's, like Heritage Radio Network, is everywhere. Here's to many more years of pizza-powered radio. Learn more about Roberta's at robertaspizza.com.
Welcome back to Pizza Quest with Peter Reinhardt, and I'm with Steven Raichlen today, the acclaimed author of the Barbecue Bible and also the about to launch Planet BBQ TV series, which by the time this show airs will already be on the air on a public television station?
Public television network, more than 350 stations across the country.
Wow! So I'll be looking forward to that. And you said that you recorded that and put it all together down in San Antonio. Why San Antonio?
Well, the theme of Planet BBQ, obviously, it's cross-cultural trends in barbecue and grilling. And San Antonio it's one of the ultimate cross-cultural cities in North America. I mean, it's more than 50% of the population speaks Spanish and identifies with Mexico. It's also the southern extreme of the southern border of traditional Texas Hill Country barbecue. So it just seemed like a perfect location for Planet Barbecue.
Can you give us a little foretaste of some of the themes or recipes or techniques you're going to be covering in the series?
Absolutely. Well, our first show is our Argentina show, and we actually have a dish that will be near and dear to your heart, I think. It's called a beef pizza. Now, instead of a pizza crust, it's actually a butterflied flank steak that gets the pizza toppings.
Oh my God.
But it's truly amazing. And we worked with a wonderful Brazilian grill master, Argentinian grill master, I'm sorry, named Al Frugoni. It's a really cool show. Let's see. Number 2 is Grilling from Across the Pond. And that was a show that explored the cross-cultural links of barbecue in the old world, barbecue in the new world. People think about the Mexican influence in Texas, but there was a huge German influence in Texas. German brewers came over, started the first brewery in San Antonio in the late 1800s. So we have a dish that's called a Spießbraten. It's a traditional stuffed pork roast that is spit roasted over a beechwood fire from the Saarbrücken region in Germany. And we reimagined it using Texas ingredients and working over a mesquite fire in the Lone Star State.
Interesting. So you really take, like, let's say, traditional ideas, but then add your own twist to it. A lot of these sound like they're your own original sort of innovations on top of an existing concept.
Well, I would say it's a mixture of both. We certainly do traditional barbecue, and that was maybe even more true in my earlier shows like Project Smoke and Project Fire, where we really tried to show the authentic traditional way to do it. And there's plenty of authentic traditional barbecue in Planet Barbecue too, but there also is a lot of, I guess what you might call cross-cultural inspirations or fusions. Another one, if you're jonesing for a dessert, I call it, it's a smoked torched creme brulee. So the idea of creme brulee, which despite its name originated in England, not in France, but this particular one, instead of baking the custard in the oven, we cook it in the smoker, so it acquires a smoke flavor.
Nice.
And of course, the blowtorch to caramelize the sugar crust on top. It's pretty neat.
That must be that makes sense when you think about it, in that the smoker is probably at a low enough temperature that you can create that custard and keep it creamy and not curdly, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah, we're working at 250 degrees, for our smoking temperature. So no problem with curdling the eggs.
Well, you've written 31 books. When we talk, everyone thinks of you maybe initially as the Barbecue Bible and maybe, a couple of the other books but you've done 31 books over the years. All, I don't know if they're all, outgrowths of the barbecue and grilling model, but how do you keep coming up with fresh new ideas for that? Because that's a lot of books.
Yeah, well, actually, it's I think since the last time I updated my biography, it's 32 books now.
32. Wow.
And one of them is a novel called
Oh, that's right.
Right, The Hermit of Chappaquiddick, which is that I am was tremendously satisfying to write, and I'm very proud of, and it's available on Amazon. If people want to see the softer, kinder, gentler side of Steven Raichlen,
I wanted to ask you about that, because I saw that you had this novel. What was that like for you as a writer? I know for all writers, every writer wants to write the great American novel, no matter how successful our nonfiction is. We all want to, do something in fiction. What was it like for you to cross that line?
It was one of the most rewarding experiences and one of the best years of my life. My editor at Workman had taken a leave of absence, so basically for a year I had a free year, and I'd had this idea floating around in my head. It's set on Chappaquiddick Island in Martha's Vineyard, which is actually where I live in the summer. And I knew how it would begin, I knew how it would end, and but I didn't know what would happen in the middle. So I started writing. I wrote a chapter, then I wrote a second chapter. And by the third chapter, I said, to my wife, I said, hey, Barbara, I think I'm going to write a novel. And it took me 6 months to write the first draft. It took me another 3 years to, do drafts 2 through 9.
Yeah.
But it's it's a foodie love story is what it is. There's no barbecue in it. There are no recipes in it because I didn't want people to think of it as another cookbook. But there's a strong food element, and it was great fun. I am not the hermit of Chappaquiddick, but there are many little autobiographical details in it.
Did you writing a novel is not an easy thing to do. I mean, it's I don't know, it takes a skill set that not everybody can do. There's certainly lots of critics of literature who are critics because they were failed novelists. They couldn't get it, couldn't get over that hump. So it's hard to get a book not only written but then also published. Did you work with writers groups? Did you have people to workshop and kick ideas back and forth, or did you just go it totally solo?
Well, I had a lot of experts that I talked to and interviewed in fields that I was not knowledgeable. In this particular novel, there's some legal issues. There's a trial. There's also a very quirky, real life, iconoclastic psychotherapist named Wilhelm Reich. Who really existed, and he was the kind of father of all the expressive therapies that were so popular in the last century, like Primal Scream and
the Orgone Box.
And the Orgone Box, exactly.
Yeah.
So a lot of research, but I was not actually part of a writers group. I would have loved doing that. And what I would say is that the writing of the novel, once I got started, was pretty easy. The real challenge for me was writing number 2, and I've got several started, but I guess the siren call of a book that somebody will actually buy ahead of time and pay you for.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just an excuse, but I do hope, to get back to fiction writing. That's my plan for the next decade.
But The Hermit is out already. The book's already out and available.
Yeah, The Hermit's been out for about 10 years now.
Oh, 10 years. Okay.
Yeah.
So like I say, it's not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. But it can take years between books like that because of the amount of effort it takes. And yet, in the meantime, you've done 32 books or 31 cookbooks or food books. And so those seem to come a little easier and roll off. But again, it comes back to, for me, this question of new recipes. Each time you do a book, you've got to introduce, at least you may be able to recycle some earlier ideas, but you've got to come up with new ideas also for each book. How do you do that? How do you keep it fresh for you?
Well, that's a great question. So the first thing whenever I start a new book is I pack a suitcase, and my books are always field research driven. For example, when I wrote BBQ Bible, I traveled around the world and visited countries on 6 continents. When I worked on Project Smoke, I packed a suitcase. I went to the UK. I went to Scandinavia. I went to Mexico, countries where Italy, northern Italy, countries where there's a real profound tradition of smoking. And, Julia Child once gave me some great advice that I think has kind of helped me keep it fresh. And she said, pick a topic that is of really broad interest, that a lot of people will be interested in, but then take an approach that you and only you can do. So for me, for the last 25 years, that's been barbecue. And certainly everybody is interested in barbecuing and grilling and barbecue sauces and indoor grilling and, you name it. But the approach that I have chosen to take, I guess, first of all, it's the global approach.
Yeah.
Probably nobody else would have been crazy enough to do all the traveling and spend all the money on traveling I have to do my research.
You have to love the travel.
Yeah, and I guess also, I've been called kind of the intellectual of barbecue, or the guy that gave barbecue a college education. And I think that's my Reed College, thinking about trying to understand the philosophy and theories and intellectual underpinnings of live fire cooking.
Well, Reed should be very proud of you. You as kind of like a distinguished visiting alum. They should have you back and give you some kind of honorary doctorate.
I think that's after I make a large enough contribution to the alumni.
Well, that's usually the prelude to that. Yeah, but this raises another question for me, because Pizza Quest is all about sort of this, something that we always talk to people who are driven by something that compels them to do this difficult task, which is, in your case, getting on the road and writing relentlessly. What is it about barbecue or cooking over fire, or this subject that you've picked, this broad subject that you've sort of thrown yourself into the deep end with, that is so compelling here? What drives you to keep going deeper and learn more about the subject itself, and then share that with others?
Oh man, well, there's so many things. And it's everything from it answers all of my intellectual needs. I mean, first of all, I believe most foods, including pizza, by the way, taste better cooked with live fire than they do in a stove or an oven or on the stovetop or by boiling. And I'm very much driven by taste. I mean, I love to eat. When I plan trips, they're trips planned around eating.
It helps. It helps to love food.
Yes. I also love fire. I love making fires, playing with fires. I have to confess now, when I was growing up, I was a bit of a pyromaniac. Sometimes got me into
now
trouble.
We're getting to the heart of it here.
Yeah. I used to build model airplanes and model ships, remember all the models back then?
Yeah.
And I would stuff them with firecrackers and douse them, with flammable model airplane glue, and then set them on fire. So it would take me days and days to build these models and 5 minutes to blow them up. But that was
that's so funny.
And I think
I was in a model rocket club. We did the same thing. We'd build these little rockets and then put this fuel pack inside and then see how high we can get it to fly.
Oh, absolutely. Did you see that wonderful movie, by the way? I think it was September or October, and it was about that craze. And, back when was it? Would have been in the 60s or of people making model.
That was when it was, in the 60s. Yeah. Yeah. I had my next door neighbor was really drove that. I used to just tag along with them because they were really into it. And his ambition was to be an astronaut. And he didn't make it, but he became a jet pilot, and fought in Vietnam, and ended up becoming a war hero there by saving people. So, anyway, there was all these little things that happened to you in childhood that kind of show up later on in maybe transmuted form, in this case, in the form of great food for you. But the fire seems to be at the heart of it, which is kind of the parallel thing with Pizza Quest, because when we gather people together for pizza events, we've had like these outdoor events where the folks who own wood-fired ovens all come together, and the thing that we noticed was that we feel like we're part of a tribe of, I call them fire freaks, and there's something that it's kind of like finding kindred spirits who all are driven by this love of fire.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Freud called it sublimation, and the idea that you take an unhealthy primal urge and you find a way to make it socially acceptable. But
right.
It is true. If you think about it, you simmer a great pot of chili, you bake a great loaf of bread indoors, and you're pretty much by yourself. However, you light a barbecue grill, everybody gathers around it, and it's an instant party. And I think that it comes from a very deep primal memory, back when we were Homo erectus and we lived in a scary world where come darkness, there were predatory animals. You were always hungry. It was dark. You were frightened. And when you could make a fire and cook communally around it, that brought you not only comfort, but survival. And I think that we subliminally remember that. And it's one reason why people are so attracted to barbecue.
That makes total sense.
Hold on 1 minute. I had an alarm set for something, and that's going to be an irritating noise. I apologize.
It's okay. So, and while he's taking care of that, I was going to mention that the word that kept coming up when we would gather people together, there's a sense of feeling that we were part of a tribe, some kind of a tribe, and then that's a very primal word, tribe.
Yes.
Yes. But yet it would come up, unsolicited. I mean, all of a sudden, everyone said, we feel like we found our tribe would be a common phrase. And when you talk about what you were just saying, it just kind of rang all those same tunes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I found with my travels in barbecue, if I were to take an Indonesian satay master next to an Indian kebab wala, next to a Turkish shish kebab guy, next to an Argentinian asador, and even if they didn't speak a word of the other's language, they would be communicating in 5 seconds. I mean, it's that universal.
Exactly. Well, before we run out of time completely, and I want to ask you a few questions about get more specific about barbecue. And people who read your books, I've read your books, probably already know this. Things have changed. 25 years ago, a much smaller group of people could answer these questions. Now everybody thinks of themselves as a grill master or a barbecue, expert. So some of our listeners may already know these, but for people that are new to the game and have ordered the Barbecue Bible because they didn't get one of the first 3 million copies that were sold, but now that it's coming out in the 25th anniversary edition, let's just go back to some fundamentals. So I see them on one of the pages here. You've got the 5 most frequently asked questions about, and you call them the Barbecue Bible, but really grilling and barbecue are kind of 2 different aspects of the same style. So we'll get into that in a second, but here's some of the questions that came up. Maybe you can just do a couple quick, sort of a lightning round of answers to this. And then those who want more can get the book. There's no point in us trying to recreate the book here for you. It's all in the book, and it's a fun book to have and to read. So one of the questions was, what sort of grill should I buy? And are there sort of some real quick guidelines for people to steer people in the right direction?
Absolutely. Well, it really kind of depends on your personality. I mean, I would say my baseline is that you should start with a charcoal kettle grill. Why charcoal? Because if you can learn to grill over charcoal, you can grill on anything. And if you start with a gas grill, which is convenient, I own gas grills, I use them, there's a certain skill set that you'll be lacking. The other advantage of a charcoal grill is that you can do all 5 methods of live fire cooking on a charcoal grill. That is direct grilling, indirect grilling, smoking, spit roasting, and what I call caveman grilling, where you lay the food directly on the fire.
Wow. You get into some of that caveman style on the TV show?
Oh, absolutely. I love caveman grilling. It's probably my favorite way of grilling. First of all, because the food is so incredibly flavorful. And second of all, I mean, I love the reaction when people watch me take a 2-inch thick porterhouse steak and lay it on the coals, and they think, oh my God, that thing must have cost $100. He's not going to put it. He wouldn't. And then he does it, and then they taste it, and it just, and it's funny. I did that. I did a TV show in Italy a few years ago for the Italian Food Network, and I did a bistec alla Fiorentina caveman style, and man, I thought they were going to lynch me, but they wound up enjoying it.
Right, exactly. Well, one of my favorite restaurants in Providence when I lived up there was Al Forno. And they were famous for their caveman steak. They would just
they called it dirty steak. And I'm so glad you mentioned them because for the last 40 minutes I've been trying to figure out how to segue to your specialty. But there is in Barbecue Bible 4 pages devoted to grilled pizza. Which was invented by Joanna George at Al Forno.
Yes.
And just to give people a little tease, this is not done on a pizza stone. You actually lay the pizza dough directly on the grill grate, and it puffs and roasters and chars. And there's a certain special sequence you have to use to layer the ingredients on, but it's really pretty magical.
I love it, and I got to learn how to make it directly from George, and started to kind of play with it myself, but because when I was living there, it was so convenient. Just go over there, sit at the bar, and order a grilled pizza. It's just another kind of pizza that takes you to a different place. So yes, thank you, and that's where I learned about the dirty steak too. And I made them myself, and I love doing it that way. What's so counterintuitive is you think you're going to ruin it, but you just get it off the coals and shake off all the coals, and and it works. So
totally different. A grilled T-bone and a caveman T-bone, same cut of meat, completely different experience.
Okay, so and of course in the barbecue Bible, is that covered? Is that technique explained in there?
I believe it is. Yeah, I believe we've got a dirty steak recipe in there.
And maybe on the series, on the new series, maybe
Certainly on the new series, and
cooking.
fantastic method for vegetables, corn, pumpkins, peppers, onions. There's almost nothing that I haven't cooked on the coals at some point. By the way, including flatbread, and that is really interesting too.
Love it. Okay, another question, and this is kind of the $1 million question because it can be great, argument topics. Is what's the difference between grilling and barbecuing? I mean, I know people, myself included, who get really we get upset when somebody refers to their grilling as barbecuing, but they seem to be two distinct, different art forms. How would you define the difference between grilling and barbecuing?
Totally different. Both use live fire, but in very different ways. Grilling is a direct high heat method used for quick cooking tender foods. You grill a hamburger, you grill a steak, you grill a fish fillet, you grill an ear on the cob. Barbecue is an indirect, low heat, slow cooking method that always involves wood smoke. So true barbecue would be Carolina style pulled pork, Texas style smoked brisket, barbecued chicken. The operative words are slow, indirect, and especially smoke. Grilling, you may or may not have smoke. With true barbecue, you must have smoke or it's not barbecue.
Interesting. Okay, and of course that the word barbecuing has become so generic now that it sometimes gets used incorrectly to refer to grilling.
Correct. Less so now. When I wrote Barbecue Bible, I'd say 1% out of 100 knew the difference. But now, we've become so sophisticated in the arts of live fire cooking. I think most people would get that concept.
And a lot of that is the evolution of the whole genre from in the 25 years since this book came out. The world has changed. Certainly the American culinary scene and understanding has changed, and the book is a big part of that, is in advancing the understanding of these concepts.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, that was, and that's, I think we're dealing with a different marketplace than we were 25 years ago, because you've got an educated group of people now. So in order to wow them, you've got to come up with something that keeps taking them to new places where they've never been before.
Well, that's the fun thing about the field of live fire cooking. There's always something new to say about it. There are new things to discover. I've actually just started work on a new book that is a little bit. It started on the grill, but in fact, it's taken a different direction. It's a book on. It's called Project Plancha, and it's a book about cooking on hot iron. Hot iron you might have on a grill, but it also includes hot iron that might be in a freestanding grill, like the Blackstone. Weber's just come out with one. Traeger's just come out with them. And I think it's going to be a very big trend. It's a very big trend already in Europe. And I'm excited, because I know barbecue inside and out, but plancha grilling, I've got a year now to learn about a new way of cooking.
Exactly. It opens up a whole new avenue, which means it gives you some more grist for the mill to be able to write about.
You bet.
Okay, let's get you out with a couple quick ones here. Charcoal, gas, or wood?
Wood is my favorite fuel because it delivers both heat and wood smoke. Charcoal is my second favorite fuel. What I used last night, because it's, you can do all 5 methods of live fire cooking on it. It's very easy to smoke with a charcoal grill. Gas is my third favorite method, only because it sort of delivers less flavor. But, I might use that tonight because I might be in a hurry and, just want the convenience of getting my dinner cooked.
And there's certainly something very convenient to be able to just, fire up the gas and have heat without having to build a fire. But again, for fire freaks, and a lot of times it's really about the wood and it's about the flames and the fire. So, okay, how do you smoke on a gas grill?
Well, on a gas grill, it's a little bit tricky. First of all, it depends on your gas grill. But some gas grills have dedicated smoker boxes with a burner underneath, and you would fill those with wood chips or chunks. Let's say if you have like a pretty standard Weber, let's say a Weber Genesis, which is a pretty common grill. Underneath the grates, there are inverted V-shaped flavorizer bars, or some models have perforated metal plates, or some of the older models have lava stones. And if you put wood chips or chunks, wood chunks between those flavorizer bars, wood chips on lava under the food, you can also get somewhat of a smoke flavor. Another trick, although it involves charcoal anyway, is to light half a dozen charcoal briquettes in a skillet and then put smoking wood chunks or chips on that and put that on the grate alongside your food. But please know that with a gas grill, you're never going to get the kind of deep, sonorous smoke flavor that you would get with a charcoal grill or a stick burner, a wood burning smoker.
You're kind of basically jerry rigging it to do something that it wasn't designed to do.
Exactly.
All right, this last question.
By the way, if I may make one exception to that rule, there is one gas grill that is expressly designed for smoking. It's the Kalamazoo, a hybrid fire grill. And on that grill, you can actually close the lid. Now, most gas grills have a big 2-inch gap between the back of the lid and the firebox, and the smoke just pours out of that. With the Kalamazoo, there's a vent at the top you can close. It's not an inexpensive grill, but it is a gas grill that lets you smoke.
And it traps that smoke in there. Wow, that's cool. I didn't know about that. That's good to know. Okay, now and then of course this is from a list of what you identified as the 5 most frequently asked questions. So the 5th one of these is, why won't my ribs come out, fall off the bone tender? In other words, it sounds like a plea for, how can I make my ribs fall off the bone tender?
Well, first of all, I think that's a common misconception that a rib should fall off the bone tender, and it shouldn't. It should have a little chew to it. That's why God gave you teeth. And a great barbecued rib, it will not be. Fall off the bone tender ribs tend to be either braised in the oven or boiled first before grilling. Yes. Both of which are, heresy in my barbecue world.
All right, that's good to know. I was because would have been sort of the follow-up question to it, because so many people have that technique where before I do my ribs, I boil them first, or I steam them first, or whatever. So number one is, the goal isn't necessarily to have fall off the bone tender. What is the goal into making sort of the ideal spare ribs or baby back ribs?
Okay, so the perfect rib, in my mind, first of all, you look at it, it's got a beautiful bark, a crust on the outside. Yeah. Second of all, you cut one rib off. You should be able to tear it apart with resistance. It should not fall apart. That's number 2. If you were to cut it, you would see a clearly delineated smoke ring, a little subcutaneous layer of a reddish pink right beneath the surface. That's the result of a chemical reaction that takes place between the hemoglobin in the meat and the smoke. You taste it. First of all, it should taste smoky. It should taste meaty. It should taste spicy, because those are the 3 sort of essential flavor components of a great rib. It should be. It shouldn't be chewy, but it shouldn't be soft and mushy either. It should have a little bit of resistance to it. And it should be so delicious that you want to go back instantly and have a second one, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth.
There, that's the key to the whole thing. Yeah. Well, that, in other words, you become obsessed with it. And that is kind of what this show is about. Pizza Quest, you represent an entire category of people, a global community of people, a tribe, as we can keep using that word, of people who are obsessed with the outcomes of cooking over live fire. And Steven, thank you so much for sharing all this, for your great books, for your wonderful TV shows, and for just keeping us all on the path with you in your quest for the exploration of all the possibilities of live fire cooking. So, Steven Raichlen, thank you so much for being on Pizza Quest today, and thank all of you for joining us. We just scratched the surface by touching on these FAQs, but for more deeper answers, go to the BBQ Bible, the 25th anniversary. Is it a new edition, totally new edition with revised copy on it, Steve?
There's some revised copy. There's a handsome cover, which is certainly way more handsome than the original cover. We've actually had 5
the benefits of success.
Yeah, it's good. And if people want more information, bbqbible.com is the website.
Thank you for that.
Up and Smoke newsletter you can sign up with for free. And I'm Steven Raichlen on social media. And Peter, as I said at the outset of this interview, I'm a huge fan of your work and your books, and it's a great honor for me to have been on the show. So thank you.
We love having you. And don't forget, folks, Planet Barbecue on your PBS stations launching. Well, by the time you hear this, it will have been launched. So time to follow up with that as well. Stephen, continued success. Let us know when you've got the next book coming out, and we'll get you back if you can join us.
I would like that. Thanks. Grill on.
Thank you, and thank you all for joining us. We'll see you at the next episode of Pizza Quest.
Pizza Quest is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org/subscribe.